right, welcome to another episode of our Real Estate Eat and Drink Real Estate Podcast. Today I am joined by Leslie Levy. Hello, thank you for coming here.
Hello, thanks for having me.
Well, why don't you tell everybody a little bit about yourself, kind of how long you've been in the business, how you got in the business, that kind of thing.
Sure. So as you mentioned, my name is Leslie Levy. I am a Illinois and Indiana serving real estate agent. I actually got my license back in 2011. So I jumped into the business because I had a child. And I was immediately thinking, okay, I don't really think I want to continue working a 9-to-5 lifestyle, but I also want to figure out ways to kind of generate additional income.
Sure.
So originally the goal was for me to get my license and for myself and my husband to actually start buying investment properties.
Ah, okay.
That's what my dad did. That's kind of how he retired, was off of his real estate investment. So that was our initial goal. So I got my license. We bought our first property, and somehow I started communicating with family and friends. So it was one deal here, one deal there. And eventually, over the course of years, what really started out as an investment vehicle for my immediate family turned into what's now my business.
Okay. So do you deal a lot with, say, rehabbers and kind of investor type clients? Is that kind of a niche for you now?
Actually, no. So I have a small group of investors that I work with. And generally, most of my business is residential sales. I'm really starting to put my foot in that commercial world just because that business has started coming to me. So as I see that I'm now referring deals, that's a key to me. Like, okay, let's talk about how do you expand that to add that to your niche of services. I do work with investors both on the Illinois and Indiana side, but I have a small group of investors that I work with because the work I find is very detailed. So working with my residential clients looks very different than working with my investor clients. So I try to make sure that I have enough time to dedicate to those. So I usually will have maybe no more than 2 investor clients on each side of the border at any given time.
Okay. And what's kind of you mentioned a difference in those 2 revenue streams for you. What's the biggest difference or a couple differences between working with an investor or an actual consumer, residential?
So I find with my investors, they're looking for numbers, right? So they're not as much concerned about what the value of that property is today. They really want to know what the income potential is of that property tomorrow. Okay. So whereas my residential clients want to know, okay, Leslie, give me what you think the value of this home is right now so that we can generate a strong offer. So with my investor clients, I'm really spending a lot of time understanding what the after rehab value looks like, pulling comps, explaining to them the finishes, what's going to make a difference in your ARV and what's not. And so because investors are usually coming with several properties and that end number is so important, I try not to take on a lot of those clients because, again, if my numbers are wrong, I may have tanked somebody's deal. So I really spend a lot of time digging in the data. Not that I don't look at data and rely on data when I'm advising my residential customers, but it just looks a little bit different.
Okay, so it's not as data dependent, you
Correct.
could say, for that. Okay.
Correct.
Is there any type of, not just between investors and residential or consumers, is there anything different? Say, you mentioned you're in Indiana as well. Is it about 50-50 between the 2 states? Is it, what's kind of some differences there for you?
That's a great question. So Indiana and Illinois look completely different.
Okay.
What I'm seeing right now in my business is I've got a lot of border crossers. So I've seen a constant uptick kind of year over year in where my Indiana business started and where it ended. So a little bit about me is I live probably 5 minutes from the Indiana border.
Oh, so you're nice and close for that stuff.
Nice and close. So once again, I was getting deals coming in that I was referring to Indiana agents. And I'm like, wait a minute, this doesn't really make any sense here, right? I do my shopping in Indiana. Oh. Literally, I'm closer to an Indiana grocery store than I am in Illinois. So that's kind of how I became an agent that was working both sides of the border. But I think one of the biggest differences with Illinois and Indiana is really the property taxes.
Okay.
So in Indiana, you are going to pay a higher price point for a property than if you picked it up and put it on the other side of the border. But the trade-off in that is that your property taxes are going to be lower. So one of the things that I do when I work with my clients who are either straddling the fence, do they want to stay in Illinois or do they want to move to Indiana? or if I have folks who work in Illinois and they say, you know what, let's go to Indiana, is I really take my time explaining the market to them. Okay. Explaining what your mortgage payment is going to look like and how the property taxes play into that. I think that's probably the biggest thing. Okay. The other thing is that Indiana does not rely as heavily on attorneys, actually not at all, as Illinois does. So that's also it's a teaching moment for my clients to really understand that, one, you absolutely have the right to have a real estate attorney in any state that you purchase in. However, in Indiana, it is not as reliant on attorneys. The title companies really do a lot of the work. So the markets look different. I'll say also with Indiana, I do a lot of new construction. And so my buyers who are buying in Indiana, I have lots of folks who are running to new construction, whereas in Illinois, the majority of my business is existing homes.
Okay. And speaking of new construction, that obviously leads to this current market.
Absolutely.
What do you think, describing the market now, and I know you hear everybody talks everything from rates are horrible, there's no supply, there's no inventory, like, describe the market now. If I walked in and said, hey, Leslie, I'm thinking about buying a property, but just, for the heck of it, talk to me about this market. What should I expect as possibly a buyer and or a seller?
So let's start with a seller, right? Okay. So I think what I try to prepare my sellers to understand is that the market of buyers looks different right now. People are spending more. They seem to be getting less in seller concessions. Interest rates we know are higher. They're not ridiculous if we look at pre-COVID, right? But I think the media has kind of relayed this information that interest rates are sky high. They are indeed higher, right? But they're not manageable. I want to prepare my sellers that buyers want a home that they can come and drop their things in. I think that's the biggest thing. If you've got a home, prepare it for the market. If you've got a leaky toilet, if you got a faucet that drips, if you've got a light that flickers, if you've got some chipping paint, the upfront investment of making those repairs is actually going to help you, because buyers are calculating their money in a very different way right now. We know that inflation is a real thing. And so people are counting, if I buy your home and I have to put an extra $3,000 in it, is it worth it for me to do that if I could buy the house across the street and can just drop my furniture and my bags? So that is what I will tell sellers. On the flip side, I tell my buyers, one, inventory isn't at all what it used to be. Know what you want before you start shopping, because we are still in a market where homes that are desirable are not sitting on the market for a very long time. Okay. We do have homes where marketing time has increased. I kind of have my own theory about that. One of the things I think is that because COVID, the real estate unicorn, did such a job to our industry, I think you still have sellers that are expecting that they can sell their properties at what they were selling them for during COVID, right? Yep. So as a listing agent coming in and explaining to sellers, look, interest rates, property taxes have gone up because value has gone up. Your property will not likely sell for what it was going to sell for if we listed during COVID. And I think consumers haven't fully understood that yet.
Yeah, they're expecting 100 offers within the first 8 minutes.
Exactly, right? And I can get you 100 offers within the first 8 minutes if you are priced appropriately. Sure. So I think we still have some homes that are not priced appropriately for today's market. So I tell buyers, we're going to look at the data, know where you want to live, have your money, because you're not always in a situation where you can expect a seller to give you closing cost credits, right? Sure. So know what you want, and then once we find it, you got to be prepared to pull the trigger. Okay. Because this is a very, very different market right now. It's kind of weird. Like, I've been doing this since 2011, so I didn't start when the market crashed. I actually started during the time when it was great to buy real estate because prices were in the toilet. Yeah. So I've kind of seen some things, but this is also very different even for me.
Well, it seems like it sounds like from what you're saying, and we've seen this a little bit in the market, is that because of higher rates, or maybe it might not be correct to say inflated costs, but just higher costs because rates are higher, a lot of the buyers, like you said, I just want something to come in. I don't want to have to do the work. I know as a buyer, I'm possibly thinking, geez, I'm already getting stuck with a higher rate.
Yep.
It's already a higher price, but the economy's not great, so I'm not willing to do that work. Is that kind of a fair?
That's spot on, Scott.
Okay.
That's spot on. And that is what I'm hearing from my buyers daily. I think one of the things that I've tried to get creative with is about bringing additional resources
Okay.
to my clients to help them also understand that. I'm a real estate professional. I understand the market. I'm full-time. I work in this market every day. But I think it's also important that my clients are paired with other professionals who also can explain and walk them through those things. So I think that's super important, meaning they got a great attorney that I work with, and that they have lenders that really understand it and can help them understand it, that, okay, if you're paying a 6.5 interest rate today, that doesn't mean over the course of your 30-year loan that you're going to be married to this 6.5 interest rate, right? Or that even lenders that have other products that can help you buy down a rate, right? Or we can kind of come up with some creative solutions to get you in that house for a mortgage that's going to be comfortable for you.
Okay. And as far as these other partners, is that a team that when you talk to either a buyer or a seller, you say, listen, here are the folks that I work with, give them a little bit of a story or a history or background on these folks?
Absolutely.
Are they pretty receptive to that? Are most folks okay with that? Like, okay, I'll trust you?
Absolutely. I will say that there are some one-off situations where buyers kind of have to be walked through the situation and understand, like, we are all working for your benefit. But I absolutely, even if someone comes to me and says, well, I've got my own lender, I've got my own attorney, or my sellers, I've got the attorney and the title company that I want to use, I say, great. I'm going to call myself, introduce them to me so that we're not trying to get to know each other in the middle of an offer.
Sure.
But I'm still going to give you this list of folks that I work with.
Okay.
And I'd invite you to call them, chat with them, see how you feel. And at the end of the day, whoever they choose to work with is ultimately their choice. But for me, my team are those folks that I've worked with who have done great work with my clients in the past, and that at the moment I really trust them to help get us to the finish line, because it's really not about one person in this deal. You got to have a great team.
Yeah, you hear people a lot of times say it takes a village.
It does, right? It takes a village to raise
sounds
a
horrible,
kid
but
and a team to sell a house. But no, it's absolutely correct.
And you're talking about buyers and sellers and these different, variations. Is there like some type of misconceptions? Is it, we hear a lot of, folks that'll come here and talk with us and chat. They talk about, nightmare scenarios and all these fun things. Is there kind of a misconceptions that you see a lot, maybe like some myths that need to be broken? Is there anything along those lines that you've noticed, at least in this market?
I have. So I think one of the things is that people understand a buyer's or a seller's market differently.
Sure.
And I think where people get their information from right now is problematic, quite honestly, right? Because if you put it on the internet, it's now the truth. So I spent a lot of time kind of undoing things that people think. So I had a person come in yesterday with his mom and dad, who were actually the buyers.
Okay.
And we were doing a home inspection, and it didn't go so well. And I said, okay, well, here are our options on what we can do. And I had the son jump in and say, well, I think we should ask for a $10,000 closing costs of credit now, even though you don't want 5, right? Because you can negotiate. And I was like, pump brakes, right? Because everybody's getting their information from YouTube.
Yeah.
Sellers are having a hard time selling now because interest rates are high. So you can go in and ask for additional concessions.
Yeah.
Yeah, but do you want this house? Right? Yeah. So there is an art to negotiating,
Sure.
but I think because there's so much information out there that a lot of times now we're countering that information. I think one of the other things that we hear a lot now are that the market is going to tank.
Yeah.
Because
the bottom will drop out any day now.
It's not, right? If you look at the data right now, you will actually see that sales prices are holding steady. And in some areas of Illinois and Indiana, they actually are still increasing, even though the number of sales has decreased.
Okay.
So I think it's important that as professionals, we kind of help our clients interpret that data and also to give them that data, right? Because if people
Yeah.
don't know, they're getting their information from their neighbor who may have bought a house during COVID,
Yep.
right? Or their mom and dad who bought a house 30 years ago. That's their frame of reference. And for them, those are their experts.
And if that was the one house they've ever bought, they just think, well, that's how it always is.
That's just how it always is, right? So it's kind of like,
true.
okay, let me counter, because I really do want to be your subject matter expert, but I also have to build that trust with my clients.
Yes.
So I do a lot of talking and training and even asking them questions to really understand what they expect of the process.
Okay.
And then hopefully by the time that we actually start opening doors, if it's a buyer, that they feel comfortable, right? Because then they will listen to the data that I'm giving them, and then they can make an informed decision about how they want to proceed. And then the same way with sellers. So sellers can interpret that same data of there's little inventory. I don't need to do anything. Just throw my house on the market, right? So it's kind of, yeah, that is true that there's not a lot in inventory, but we don't want your house sitting because we haven't done the steps to make your home desirable.
Sure. And it's funny because you bring up the internet, because it seems like that's been a double-edged sword. Mm-hmm. And so do people normally come in and kind of like dump their expectations on you? Or do you find that it's more like they tell you what they want, you kind of start going through the process, and then all these biases or all these preconceived notions start to come out? Is there kind of a pattern to that?
I get a little bit of both.
Okay.
So I wouldn't necessarily say that there's a pattern, but I will say that my buyers now come with more information than my buyers have come with in the past. I think that's a good thing,
okay,
right?
So
because some of the information that they have is good, right? It's relevant, it's on task, it's on target. I just think that sometimes it takes a little bit of helping to kind of steer them to how to actually interpret what they're getting.
So they may say something to you or relate a story, and then it's kind of, you feel like it's kind of your job to let me interpret how that actually translates to this market. It may not be what you're thinking directly, but
absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely. I think one of the other things that's happened is that people have heard you need to get pre-approved for a home before you start shopping. Mm-hmm. That's amazing because people are listening to that.
Yeah.
So I'm getting more buyers now these days that come with a pre-approval letter in hand.
Okay.
Which wasn't always the case. I would get folks who'd say, let's go shopping. And I said, okay, as soon as you get qualified, right?
Yep.
And it's not because I don't want to spend my time with you looking at homes, but I really want to make sure that we're looking at something that is going to be within your purchasing power.
Yeah.
Because there's nothing like going and seeing a home that's outside of your purchasing power, and now you're comparing every other home.
Everything's got to be
to
this.
that one, right?
Yep.
So it has its challenges, but I think it's good because now I'm getting people who are more prepared.
And that's good.
That's great.
Right? And you feel that's a good uptick.
That's an uptick. It even happens with my sellers, right? Because I have some sellers who will come in and they'll say, okay, I've looked to see, I think this is what my home is worth, right? Okay. And I say, okay, so at least we've got a starting point. And so I can see that they've spent the time investing their energy in really getting prepared to market, which is always a good thing, right? So
Sure.
even if they're off with what they think their home is worth because they may not know how to interpret the value, others do a really great job at it. But either way, it gives us a starting point to kind of really dive into what we're going to do together.
Okay. And so with all these changes and the internet and all this stuff, is there maybe one thing that you kind of consider you're an expert at that helps you help your clients navigate this market? Is there like a particular process or one thing that you do for them? Talk to me about that a little bit.
I think it's my patience.
Okay.
Because I do this as my full-time job, and because I value my clients and their investment that they're putting into their home, I approach this as let me help you get to where you want to go. Okay. How do you want to become a home seller, or how do you want to become a home buyer? So I can take my time walking you through the process, advocating for you, but I don't push my buyers to buy anything, right?
Okay.
I've had clients say to me, well, of course you're going to tell me that because you just want me to buy this house, right?
You're evil.
And I've gotten really comfortable saying to folks, I really want you to have the house that you want. If you buy this one today, fantastic. If you don't, what are we going to see on Wednesday? And I'm okay with that, because I think I built my business to a point where I'm not chasing a dollar. I'm stable. I'm financially stable. My business is doing well. And I really do care that my clients buy something that they like. What I don't want is for you to say, I forced you to buy a house, you've had second thoughts, and then you trash me, to all of your neighbors or your family and friends, because I really do. It's important to me that my clients trust me. And when they do that, I think they feel comfortable allowing me to service their family and friends.
Well, it's the referral end, right?
You're
thinking long term.
It's the long term, right?
Okay.
Because, and again, my reputation is important to me.
Sure.
So I think I take the time with my clients. If they're going to buy now, they're going to buy now. And if they're not, they're not.
So it's fair to say you're patient, but you're still driving the bus, trying to,
Absolutely.
okay, like you said, I thought that was a great comment is, okay, that's great, you don't want to buy this today, but where are we looking on Wednesday?
Yeah, I mean, we keep it moving.
Yeah.
And I approach all of my clients like that. I have clients that buy $700,000 and $800,000 homes, and I have clients that buy $90,000 and $100,000 homes.
Sure.
And I treat them all the same. I value whatever time they've spent preparing to buy a home or to sell a home. And I really want them to understand that. But I also feel like when you've done your due diligence, making sure people understand what they're getting into, they have more confidence. And then they do end up buying or selling with you because they're sure of themselves.
And they feel good that the process that you're there with them as opposed, for them. Making them do something, or like you said, you made me buy this house. Like that just sounds ridiculous to people in the business. But how did I make you do anything? But
people think that, right? They're like, oh, you're just telling me this is a good deal because you want me to buy it. I don't care if you buy it or not. This house, but I do want you to get a house because you've told me that that's what's important to you.
So the referral aspect is very big to you. That's always present with your thought process, with whether it's a seller or a buyer. Is, hey, I want you to tell somebody I did a good job for you.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely.
So what would you say, along that same vein of thought, what would you say really separates you, Leslie Levy, versus another agent? What do you think is the biggest thing that separates you?
I think the time that I put in with my clients and my preparation.
Okay.
So one, we're not hitting the street until I know exactly or around about what you're looking for, right? Because I know that changes sometimes. So we're not going to look at homes until we've had a consultation, until we know that you are qualified to purchase, until we have a general area in which you're going to purchase in, and you've thought out what's important to you and what's not. Because we know that changes once you start opening doors, but at least we've got a starting point. Okay. And with my sellers, I take the time to, one, really understand their position, right? Do you have to move? Are you choosing to move? Do you have a loan balance on your current home? What do we need to sell your home for in order for you to walk away happy? And then we really develop a comprehensive marketing plan. So I do a lot of work on the front end with my buyers and sellers so that when we get into thick of even buying and selling their homes, we're ready to go, we're processing, and we get them to their end goal as quickly as we can.
So are you meeting with folks maybe one or two times before you even start going out?
I am. Absolutely.
Wow. Okay.
So if I talk about my sellers, I don't believe in sending somebody a CMA that I did at my computer that I have not walked foot in your home.
Sure.
Right? That's me. I've had potential sellers say, well, the agent across the street, I called and asked them and they sent it to me. Great. Right? But you're calling me for a reason. And so for me, I want to see what your home looks like, right? I can have a roundabout number in my head and we can discuss that when I come to your home, but I don't do CMAs unless I've been in your home. So that I can give you a really good value, and I also can tell you what I'm going to provide for yourself. So I see my sellers twice. I see them when I go to do that CMA, and then if they decide to list with me, then I go out again because we're going to prepare your home for marketing. So we're going to do a thorough walkthrough along with all of my recommendations to get you to the price that you want to be at, and then I'll see you again on the day that we do our photos. With my buyers, I do a telephone consultation before we start shopping, which could be as short as 30 minutes, right, or as long as an hour to really get a feel for what's important to them. Okay. And then we start shopping after I've reviewed your documents. I'm going to call and introduce myself to your lender, and then we're going to start shopping. And
Do you
then,
find people just like you start asking them what they want and they have like zero idea?
I get most people kind of think they know what they want, or they have this huge list. I see sometimes that changes once you actually start shopping. But my sellers get touches and my buyers get a couple touches too, because after we do that first round of showings, I'm going to have a consultation with you in that last time. So by the time they leave with me, they're like, oh my God, I didn't expect this. Because we got to know each other, right? So what do you like? What do you don't like in this house? What did you think was this or that? So we usually do that, and I don't schedule more than 3 homes on the first time that I go out with a buyer, because I really want to leave time for them to talk to me and for me to get a feel for what they like. So if we have to course correct, the next time we go out, we're looking at homes that may be actually closer to what you really want if you weren't able to communicate.
Yeah, where they absorbed it last time and said, okay, that I didn't expect to get, like walking through basements, like, man, none of these, they smell like pets or, like anything. And it's like, okay, maybe that we add to the list, like no prior pets or something, something like that, right?
It's those things that people are like, you've been on HGTV, right? Or you're like, yeah, and I got to have this, and this. And I'm like, okay, what do you want to spend? Well, I'm approved for 5, but I only want to spend $350. Gotcha. So I'm going to take you to $350, and you're going to see what $350 buys, and you're going to be like, well, Leslie, I told you I had to have. And it's like, yeah, but that's kind of, you have to figure out what that cost. Yeah. And so that's kind of some of the course correcting.
What do you get with that cost?
What do you get with that cost? Right?
So you really do have a process. I mean, from what it sounds like what you're telling me is whether it's a buyer or a seller, you really try to focus in on these people, kind of tell me what you want, right? And if I'm not paraphrasing right, tell me. But tell me what you want, then kind of let's look at some things on paper anyways that are what you want. And then you see them, and it's like, oh, yeah, we were way off or whatever. And so you try to adjust with them. Are most people pretty receptive to that? I mean, once you've gone through this whole process, talked to them a couple times, maybe done a phone consultation, and now you're telling them, okay, this is, do you ever have like a hard, like, truth, like a heart-to-heart conversation? Like,
I have one right now.
You told me this is never going to happen. Are you going to change your mind? Like, is that ever?
I have one that is under contract right now. And we're having this conversation, right? And we're border crossing, right? So what you're going to pay in Illinois is not the same that you're going to pay for that house in Indiana. And so I have people that kind of struggle with that idea, because $450 in Illinois gets you an amazing house. $450 in Indiana gets you a nice house, right? But it's not the same when I'm looking at my folks who are coming from the south suburbs and what the expectation is. So I have a client right now who's wrestling with that. Do you want the land and a nice house, or do you want all of the upgraded finishes, and it may even be new construction, but it's on a smaller lot? And even though we've seen probably 20 homes before they got under contract, I don't think it actually clicked until I was saying, yeah, right? You chose the house with the smaller lot and the great finishes.
Sure.
There's going to be a compromise there.
Well, it sounds like from what you said, 20 houses, I mean, that's where your patience kicks in.
And it's usually not my thing, right? Because usually by that time we've honed in and we've got something. But again, it's that challenge, right? Because you have to decide what's most important to you. Or you say, okay, I'm going to kick in another $50,000, and then you can have the majority of the things that you want.
Sure. And most people are pretty amenable to, all right, that makes sense. And
some folks, I'll say,
well, you're smiling like common sense, Scott. No.
A lot longer to really get to the point where they understand. Yeah, we've seen 15 houses, and you have the same objection because what you want costs more. Than what you're working with. So
trying to help them understand, listen, you keep telling me this.
Yeah, they keep sending you houses. And so then I get to the point where I teach my clients how to read the listing sheet, right? So we went and saw this house yesterday. The bedroom was 12 by 13, and you told me it was absolutely too small to be your primary bedroom. You just sent me this house today. The bedroom is 12 by 12. It's actually smaller. Oh, okay. So now we're going to cross that one off the list, right? Because there's no reason to go see that house. So that comes back to kind of where the education and training goes on to kind of help your client. Because I don't want them getting in the car to go see this house that they're going to be disappointed with.
Yeah.
Because they just really didn't take the time to read the listing sheet because the pictures were fabulous.
Okay.
It happens a lot.
All right. Well, it sounds like with the process and everything else, you've got a very specific, detailed approach with these folks. What, in general, maybe back up or a bigger picture, why is home ownership important? Is there kind of a driving thought with you? What's the...
I'm so glad you asked me that. Home ownership is so important because it provides more than just a roof, right? It's a vehicle for wealth long term, right? If I can own my home and I've got kids that are going to college, or I've had an accident and I have a medical emergency, or I want to now start buying additional properties.
Okay.
If I don't have additional sources of income coming in to help me support those things, but I have a home, my home is going to grow in equity. And I can use that equity to finance other things. So home ownership is critically important. It also provides you with freedom, right? Who wants to be living in a place, be comfortable there, put down roots, and someone else tells you that you got to move because now they're selling it?
Sure.
So it just provides so many things that I feel are critically important. But for the majority, it's an investment vehicle. Yeah. It's an investment vehicle, and it is a sense of security.
Do a lot of people come in with any of those kind of preconceived notions? Or maybe not preconceived, but do they come in with those thoughts of, hey, I've maybe heard this in some other form? Do you get a lot of that or no?
Not as much. I think people may have it in the back of their head. I think especially when rent rates started to increase, I think people's light bulbs started going off because they were like, wait a minute. And then the other thing that happened is during COVID, property values skyrocketed. Landlords who had been holding these properties for years decided to cash in.
Yep.
So we had a lot of folks entering the market who had been paying a reasonable amount of rent who now have been forced to move. And that was a horrible feeling, especially during a pandemic, to know now you got to figure out where you're going to live. So you had a lot of folks who had to determine what's my next step. And I did get a lot of buyers during the pandemic because their landlords were selling their homes. Yeah. So it clicked for them at that moment that, wait a minute, I don't want this to ever happen again. So let me go buy my own property.
That seems great. And it does seem like you have a real passion for helping these folks understand not just, hey, your buddies are buying a house or something, or you should do it, but just there's a thought process behind it.
It is. And my background is social services.
Okay.
So that's where I spent the first 20 years of my career after college, was helping people. So I really see my job and my business as a realtor as a helping professional. So I'm still helping people achieve a goal that's really important to them. So that's probably also why I approach it a little bit differently. I have colleagues that view this as a sales job, right? And that's fine, and it works for them. But I don't view this as a sales job. I really see myself as being a helper.
Okay. So you're really guiding them through that process as opposed to ticking one off.
And ticking one off, right? Yeah. Now, when I sell a house and close it, I'm going to celebrate that client, right? I'm also going to celebrate that I had another sale. But for me, celebrating that client and their home ownership journey, that person who either bought or sold, to me is just as important as me celebrating another transaction.
Which is fantastic. I mean, it comes across, you have a passion for that. Talk about in general, what areas do you service? Is there any kind of projects or anything that kind of ties you to these areas, or the reason that you're going after these areas?
So my primary service areas are south suburbs and northwest Indiana.
Okay.
I do work with buyers and sellers all over Chicagoland. If I'm not able to service you, I have a group of agents who work with me. So I may still be primary on your deal, but you may have another agent that takes you out for showings. I exclusively work with my listings, so I will never hand a seller off to another agent.
Sure.
If I agree to work with you, I'm what you're gonna get.
Which is good.
Which is good. I just think there's a difference, right, when you're working with a seller and walking them through that there are things that I can do that another broker may not be able to manage, right? Okay. When I have my buyers, I let them know, hey, you may be escorted out by another agent sometimes, right? But I'm still primary on your deal, and you're still going to see me. I don't just leave my folks. But south suburbs and northwest Indiana is the bulk of where my business is. But I do service, like I said, I service buyers and sellers all over the Chicagoland area.
So you'll go to Elgin if you need to.
If you are within, my thing is, if you are within a 50-mile drive of me,
okay.
I'm there.
Wow.
Yeah.
So is there anything else as far as like, do you do any kind of like community involvement or I want to say nonprofits or anything like that?
No, you can say that. I am very much involved in my community. So two of the organizations that I am intimately involved in are Jack and Jill of America and the Links Incorporated.
So explain those to folks that may not have heard that. What's the Jack and Jill?
Sure. So Jack and Jill of America is a organization of African American families. Was actually founded in 1938. Wow. And it services children from ages 2 to 18. So as a mom, I'm a member. And this is what's so important to me. It's kind of how I ended up from this being a side gig into this really being my business, is that being present for my children is important. So through Jack and Jill, we do activities every month that are geared towards growing the next African American leaders, but we also do service to our community. So what we want is not only for our children, but for all children. So in that organization this year, I actually will be the chair of the Community Impact Committee for the Midwestern region.
Wow, congratulations.
Thank you. I'm super excited about that. And then I'm also a member of the Links Incorporated, which is an international organization for African American women who are in business. So you have legislators, attorneys, doctors, lawyers, social workers, and our mission is really to impact our community, and that organization has been around since 1946. So
holy cow.
That's really where I put my time when I'm not working or spending time with my family, because my community is important. Like, I'm from the south side of Chicago. That's where I was born and raised.
Yeah.
My parents moved here from the south. My mom moved here from Jackson, Mississippi, or a little town called Yazoo City, Mississippi.
All right.
My dad moved here from Mobile, Alabama. So I'm the first one of those who was actually born in Chicago. And so because I have roots throughout the city, I was raised in an underserved community. So it's really important for me that I continue to give back of my time and help strengthening and growing those communities in any way that I can.
Wow. Well, obviously, someone would hear all this and think, oh my gosh, I've got to get a hold of Leslie. Tell everyone, what is the easiest way to get a hold of you? What's the best way to do that? Do you have a special platform that you use, or is it just send me an email?
You can find me on Instagram at Leslie Sells Homes _. I'm on Facebook at Leslie Hill Levy. And then my cell phone number is 773-719-7601. I carry one phone. It is my business line as well as my personal line. You can find me on the internet at www.lesliesellshomes.net. And, I'm happy to talk with people. Okay. So if you're not even ready right now, but you're thinking, I might want to buy a home or I might want to sell a home, let's talk about it and see how we get you there.
Fantastic. Well, hopefully through this, we can help drive some folks your way. It sounds like you really got a good handle on what you're doing.
Thanks, Scott. I really appreciate you having me here, and I really appreciate Citywide Title. Little plug, right? Because I appreciate you and the work that you do as a title company.
Thank you so much. We really appreciate having you on today.
Thank you.
Thank you.